Great. Okay, we have had a couple little technical issues, so we're all going to just take a deep breath, because this is a session that I hope you will enjoy as a sort of a mindful exercise on how to find your zen of web programming. And I'd love to welcome you to Microsoft Build. This is Wednesday morning, a session on web programming using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So before I start, I just want to mention that we have a code of conduct, and I'm sure you've seen this before, but you can, read through this. One thing we are hoping that if you see anything of interest, you can take screenshots, but please don't take screenshots of people. So that's the one thing we'd like you to do. And all of these resources will be available on the web later. Okay, so welcome to this session. Today we're going to do something a little different for Build, I think. We're going to go ahead and plant a terrarium using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And I hope it'll be an enjoyable experience. We're not going to have time to do all of web programming in 20 minutes, but I want to just, work a little bit together. I'd love for you to code alongside of me. I'm going to give you some seed code, no pun intended, and you can start planting your terrarium as you go along. So my name is Jen Looper. I'm a cloud advocate lead on the academic team at Microsoft. It's the greatest team at Microsoft, hands down, no question. Just kidding. We are all about students and teachers and educators and people who love to learn. People, whether they're in school or not in school, if you love to learn, you might enjoy some of the activities that we on the academic team do. And I'm joined here with my daughter, Stella who is a student at Babson College, and she is, there she is. And we're together here in the same room, and she's going to be moderating your questions. So happy to have everyone here, and I've also got some other great helpers on with us. Just wanted to mention that I also am the founder and CEO of an international nonprofit called Front End Foxes, and you can always find us on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Jen Looper, Front End Foxes, frontendfoxes.org, and these are for people who are learning new front-end technologies using JavaScript. So if you are a front-ender and you're learning something new, or you would like to learn something new, you can come and join us. So we love to find new faces. All right, so this is what we're building. So I have drawn for you as a special treat a bunch of little succulents and cacti, and we're going to be taking these images, laying them out on a web page. We have drawn that terrarium in CSS alone, and we're going to use JavaScript to be able to drag them mindfully around your screen and place them in your terrarium in a very beautiful fashion. So at the end of this session, you'll have a lovely terrarium that you can share and enjoy. Okay. So when you're building a terrarium, or actually when you're building any kind of web project, you're going to start asking yourself a couple questions. And those questions include, what technology will I need to build this thing? What am I gonna pick? What do we want this project to do? How do we want it to behave on the screen? How do we want it to look? Do we want it to behave in certain ways cross-platform? Do we want it to behave certain ways on your iPhone versus iPad versus your browser? That's a very important thing to think about. How are you going to set up your project in terms of the actual code? So with this situation, our cat just went crazy. She wants to join us. Sorry. How do I set up my project? For me, I'm a Vue.js developer, and I would grab Vue.js and pump in a couple npm packages, npm install, and just go to the races. But we're not going to do that today. We are not going to use any packages at all. We are not going to use jQuery. If you start looking on Stack Overflow or a source like that for how to do the thing that we're going to do today, everybody's going to say, oh, you should use jQuery UI. We are not going to use jQuery UI. We're going to use good old-fashioned DOM manipulation. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means. And then we need to think about, where will this project live on the web? So all very valid questions. Okay, first question, what technology will I need to build this thing? You're going to need an IDE, an integrated development environment. I like Visual Studio Code. I've been using this for years. It is a very solid piece of software that you can use to build your web apps, although you don't really need such a thing. With this particular system that I'm going to show you with this structure, you could just use a text editor. It's that simple. But Visual Studio Code will give you code completion and IntelliSense once you start getting into more complicated programming, and you're going to love it, trust me. And then we need to think about what are the bones of our app. The bones of the app are HTML. HTML is always going to build up your skeleton. So what happens with HTML is when you are loading a web page, the browser is going to create a document object model of that page. So this is the DOM that I'm going to talk about. And the DOM is a tree of objects. And with JavaScript and CSS and HTML, you can manipulate the DOM. It is really, it gives you superpowers. So very important to know your HTML and be able to explain what you're doing in HTML. The skin of your app, what makes it look nice and perform nicely sometimes, because you can use it for animations as well, is CSS, cascading style sheets. I am not the greatest CSS developer in the universe. I like to use libraries like Tailwind. There are other libraries, even things like Bootstrap, that allow you to get past some of the complexities of CSS, but we're just going to have it's such a basic app, we're just going to use CSS to get moving. And the muscles of your app is JavaScript. Yay, JavaScript. So JavaScript is the language of the web. And this is something that as a front-end web programmer, you're going to need to know pretty well. And I've been programming for 20 years. The JavaScript I came up with is not the same JavaScript as today. So JavaScript is not a static language, and it has evolved a lot. So it's good to keep up to date. And I'll give you a hot tip, which is that Dan Abramov has a fantastic newsletter called Just JavaScript. And you can subscribe to that and get a wonderful, beautiful kind of email that he sends out periodically on JavaScript fundamentals. It is really a work of art. I strongly recommend it. Okay, what is this terrarium going to do? You're going to be able to drag plants in and out of the terrarium as a relaxation technique, or just for fun if you don't feel like relaxing. How do we want it to look? We're going to have 2 rows of plants on the right and the left, and then the terrarium in the center that's going to allow the plants to look like they're inside. So that's interesting. We're going to need to do some little manipulations with your Z index in CSS. That shows how the layers of the app from front to back will be placed. So I'm going to pay attention to that. Setting up the project, just 3 files and some images. JavaScript file, a CSS file, an HTML file. All of the files are imported into your HTML file, and you're going to need a folder with your image assets included. It's going to live on the web because you're going to push that folder to GitHub and publish it with GitHub pages. All right, let's build. Come on, little plant. Oh, he's not moving. So what I would like you to do, there we go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and minimize these slides, because what I would like you to do is to go to AKAMS/terrarium. So if you go to AKAMS terrarium, you're going to find a repo. And in this repo, there are 2 branches. So somebody can add in the chat AKAMS/terrarium, TERRARIUM. I misspell it too. There are 2 branches. One is master and one is student. I would like you to go ahead, everyone, and click, if you have a GitHub account, go ahead and fork this repo by clicking fork at the top right and navigate to your student branch. The student branch is unfinished, and we're going to go ahead and finish it. Oops, got the wrong image on that one. That's okay. So this is the master branch. There are some links here that you can use, kind of interesting. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and either fork it if you have a GitHub account. If you don't have a GitHub account, you can clone it or download it just onto your local. And then I would like you to go ahead and open up the code. I'm going to explain how this is going to work. So here I have the finished product, and you're just able to drag and drop terrarium elements onto your, oops, that's a little air plant, this little guy. So I hand drew these for you, special. So it looks like this. This is your interface. Okay, this is what you're going to be building. And what I've done is I have this code open here in Visual Studio Code with my 3 files, index, script, and style. And you can see I'm on the student branch. And here I've opened up this HTML file in my Edge browser. So let's just pause for a second Sorry?
They're asking to zoom in.
Oh, zoom in, I'm sorry. Okay, well, you can probably see the element here. I'm going to zoom in when I start talking more about code. Before I talk about code, I want to just mention that since we're building for the web, you need to pay attention to browser support. The trick with this kind of project, and I went down a little rabbit hole with this thing, is that I thought what we would build today would be a drag and drop interface. Now there is an API available for HTML drag and drop, but we're not really building drag and drop. We are building just a draggable interface. So it's just a place where you're going to be dragging elements, because what we want this thing to do is not really dropping things here. We want to be able to drag things in and out so that we can, replace the elements as we go. So I decided not to use the drag and drop API. So let's just close that tab. And once you start thinking about the APIs that you want to use, you need to start thinking about browser support. So I decided to go ahead and not use a drag and drop API, but rather to use a mouse move API, a mouse event API. So the browsers have the capabilities of allowing you to move things around on the screen using various APIs. The trick with using the mouse API is that it's only going to work on the web. What are you going to do when you're on your iPhone and you need to, touch something on the screen and make it move around? That's not going to work using a mouse API. So I had to switch around and use a little bit different API called the pointer event API. And we'll show how I use that in the JavaScript. So when you are questioning what API you're going to use on the web, visit caniuse.com. So this is a place where you can really start figuring out which browser support is available for the API that you're thinking of using. This one is pretty good, so your pointer event API is supported nicely in the newest versions of these browsers. Now, if you're in a professional setting and you have to support an older browser, this is going to be your home. You're going to live on caniuse.com because you need to figure out, what is going to work for what browser. And if something isn't going to work, you might need something called a polyfill, which will allow older browsers to at least simulate the experience that the newer browsers are going to use. We're going to build using Edge, so that's fine. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so on the student branch, this is where we're at here. So as you can see, this is the final product, and you can see it has some dirt down here. So what we're going to do, and this is all done in CSS, so we need to add a couple things so that we can get dirt into our terrarium. So let's go to index.html. Okay, I'm going to just bump up the code here, and you can see on line 68, I put a little note. I need to add dirt. Great, let's add some dirt. So div class equals dirt. So go ahead and code along with me. That's all we need to do, because what we have here is in the HTML, we have just the H1. Sorry, I should start at the top. We've got some links included here. We've got our style sheet and our script.js file included. We have an H1, which is important for your web page. That's your title tag. And then we have these rows of plants. We have a plant holder here on the left container, a plant holder on the right container, and then we have this terrarium that's built right here. So we just added a little div here that is going to be full of dirt. But if you refresh, nothing happened because we haven't styled it yet. So let's add some styles. So in this element about line 84, we have to add some dirt styles. All right, so I'm going to make the width of the dirt 58%. Because it's about half of the amount of screen, if you can remember how the terrarium is sort of like half the screen, but is placed in the center. So we're going to make it width 58%. We're going to make it kind of short, height 5%. We're going to make a background. I'm going to just make it brown, but if you wanted to not have dirt and have sand, you could make it like tan or a tan color. It needs to have absolute positioning. And you can see the power of Visual Studio Code right here because it's basically helping me complete my typing, which is good because I'm nervous and my hands are shaking. So, okay, so position absolute because we need to place that from within the divs. We have some interesting things that we need to do to its border radius. We're going to add a no border on the top, right, and left, and curves of 3 rem each on the bottom right and left. So it's going to be tight corners on the top and curves on the bottom, so it'll curve to the bottom of the glass. We're going to just raise it a little bit from the bottom, and we're going to push it to the left. This is where your absolute positioning comes in. Give it a little opacity, so it looks like it's sitting in glass. Opacity at 1 is 100% opacity. So here we're going to do a point, I don't know, like 0.7. Sorry, 7. And the last thing we need to do is give it a z-index. So remember I talked about z-index. We need to push this back because it needs to sit behind the glass. So you can see the z-index of the glass is 3, like the jar top is 3. We're going to give this a lesser z-index, so it seems like it's sitting behind the glass part of the jar. I'm going to save that, and let's see if the dirt came through and see if we like the color. Yeah, oh, it's kind of ugly. The thing is, when you put in a z-index and an opacity change, your color might be transformed a little bit here. So I will change that because I'm really not ecstatic about that peachy color. So we're going to do a 3A24 1D color because I know for sure that's a nice dark brown. Let's refresh. That's a little bit better anyway. Okay, so we have just added dirt to a jar using HTML and CSS. I hope you're enjoying yourself. 20 years of programming, here I am adding dirt to a jar. This is great. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to take a look at the heart of the app, which is your script elements. So navigate over to script.js in the root folder, and you'll see that we really are not writing that many lines of code, maybe 50, 60 lines of code, and 14 of those are allowing a drag element to be called on our plants. So if you notice in the HTML, all of the plants have an ID. So we have plant 11, 12, 13, and 14. Here in the script file, we're going to drag our elements by their ID. So plant 1, I'm going to guess, is this guy. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. And each of those has the capability of being dragged. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a big function. And this big function is called a closure. What is a closure? So I put a little note here. A closure is basically a function and a function. Can you all see this okay? It's big enough? Okay. Mm-hmm. A closure is a function and a function, and it's a combination of a function bundled together or enclosed with references to its surrounding state. So the surrounding state will allow us to keep track of where this terrarium element is. So we're never going to lose track or touch of our terrarium element. So the closure gives you access to the outer function scope from the inner function. So here's the outer function drag element that's being called here. And inside we're going to have a pointer drag, an element drag, and a close drag element function. So let's start building out these things. So what's going on with this draggable interface is we are forcing your elements on the screen, your plants, to follow the mouse or the pointer, whatever pointer you're using. It could be your finger or an Apple Pencil, following that pointer around and behaving in a certain way when you pull up the pointer, when you unclick the mouse, when you stop dragging. So we're going to keep track of these positions of these elements because we need an X and a Y position to be kept track of. So the first thing we're going to do is when you touch a terrarium element, any terrarium element, you need to start dragging the pointer. So let's add a line here, terrarium element on pointer down. What's going to happen when I push the pointer down? We're going to start this new function, pointer drag. Okay. Save that. Nothing's going to happen because we need to build out pointer drag. Okay, but at least we're starting to use this API, that pointer API that is built into the browser, and we're going to go ahead and start really building this out. So now we need to start the pointer drag function, and we need to we're basically hijacking this API. We're hijacking the browser so that we can keep track of where the pointer is and where the elements are with respect to the pointer. So let's change the position of 3 when we start our pointer's drag. So you're going to set position 3 to be client X. Same thing for position 4. E client Y. So E is this event that's being called as you drag, drag, drag. So we're just going to keep track of where the position is according to the client X and the client Y. Okay. Now we need to start the drag, and we're going to again hijack this document API. So document on pointer. So you can see the IntelliSense here. It's giving me a lot of options. So I can just use on pointer move. When the pointer moves, we're going to start element drag. So we're going to call that next function. And when the pointer goes up, we're going to close the drag element. So document on pointer up, close drag element. I love IntelliSense. It's almost impossible to screw things up, although I manage at least 3 times a day. Okay, I'm going to save that. Let's just see how we can debug this sort of thing. So you can always debug by clicking inspect and looking at your console. Is anything happening? Let me refresh. Anything happening here? Yes, so when I click an element, when I start a pointer event, you can see that the pointer event here is being dumped out. And you can see client X here, it's pretty small, but you should be able to see, offset X and page X, screen X, all the X's and Y. Here's client X. So client X here is 1064. Let's see what it is here. Client X, 128. That makes total sense, right? X and Y coordinates. Okay, remember those Cartesian coordinates from school? All right. Let's start building out element drag. Now we need to start thinking about, as we drag an element, where we're going to set our positions. So here we're going to set position 1 to equal position 3 minus E client X. Okay, so we're going to set this new position to be the old position minus the client X. So that's where we're making a comparison of where the mouse was and where it is now and resetting the position. Position 2 is going to equal position 4. That's where the Y mouse was, remember, E client Y. Position 4 minus E client Y. Okay, so we've reset position 1 and position 2 from 0 to where the bits and pieces have wound up. And then we're going to reset position 3 and position 4. So position 3, did I do that right? Yeah, position 3 is now E client X, and position 4. So you can see how we're kind of hijacking the DOM and just forcing positions to be reset according to where our client has wound up. And now if we start console logging again, let's just refresh everything here. Let's see what happens. Oh, holy cow. Awesome. Okay. Now, we haven't done anything to stop this behavior from happening, right? I clicked it, but it's going to keep going and keep going. So we need to finish this function by building out the close drag element. So this shenanigans of hijacking the DOM will stop. So at this point, remember when we raise our mouse, we want to close the drag element. So we're going to do document, on pointer up, pointer up, just set it to null so that you can start the whole process again when you put your pointer down again. On pointer move is null as well, and that will allow you to restart your movements of the pointer and restart your movements of elements to where they need to be. So I just unclicked, I raised my pointer and moved it to a different element, and I can keep going with this guy, and keep going and keep going. And if you followed along, you now have a terrarium. Yay! Fantastic. Our little succulents are very happy. Okay, So at this point, you're all set. You've built your terrarium. Now you need to think about where it's going to live on the web. So what you can do is you can commit your code to GitHub. So here I'm on my master branch, and I can just go to settings, and you can scroll down to GitHub pages, and you can set the GitHub pages to build on your branch, whichever branch you decided to build on, whether it's master or student. And then at that time, your site will automatically be published, and the URL will look something like this. It'll be your username.github.io/myterrarium. So even with just 3 files and a few images, you're able to build a draggable interface that works really pretty well. And I think that given that we have 5 minutes, I should stop talking and maybe answer some questions. So I will close these things. I'll leave the terrarium up on my screen. Oh, the other thing is I totally missed this piece, but you noticed in the CSS there's a lot of percentages. That's so that this can be responsive. So this is another thing that you need to watch out for. So if I was to open this on a different size screen, it should scale. Everything should scale nicely. And this should work pretty well on your iPhone. I think there's more things on your device. I think on your mobile device. I think we can change the CSS to make it a little bit better on a mobile device so that you're not dragging the screen alongside of your finger. But it does work. So you have just created a responsive, adaptive piece of software. You can run a, if you go to inspect, this is another thing I forgot to show you. You can go to audits, and you can run a lighthouse report to just test your accessibility. And because we have a very simple interface and we put alt tags on all of the plants, this gets 100% lighthouse score. So you have really created a high quality piece of software, and I'm very proud of you. And now I really am going to stop blabbering and start taking a look at questions. Okay. All right, yeah, just send myself live. Great. So any questions I can answer? Yeah, so basically, Fernando, what we're doing, so let me read out the question. Help me understand why you needed to set the element's new position with terrarium element style top to terrarium element offset top position 1 pix. So we're basically hijacking not only the DOM, we're also giving us a new CSS style. And if you look at the CSS, I can do that in this thing. Let's see. Inspect the CSS. As we move bits and pieces, you can see how the style is moving. So we're taking the offset and we're giving it a new pixel value here. Yeah. So watching your console, how the style itself is changing. You're not only manipulating the DOM, you're manipulating the CSS. So that's what's going on. Achilles, you wanted to take a look at the HTML declaration of the dirt again. So all it is div, and then just set, it's a new div, just set it to the class equals dirt and style up the dirt. And you can take a look at my source code on master if you like. Why is the onPointer up event on the terrarium element, but the onPointer move on the DOM? Good question. So let me just get back to the code. So you notice that the onPointer down is here. This is the external part of the closure. So this is the kind of the parent, and it's just setting this, grabbing this first element and setting an onPointer down function to it, and then it's going to go ahead and start listening for these pointer drags. So it's kind of like an indirect listening to what's going on. The E pass through is the event. So it's listening for events that are happening from this parent part of the closure. I don't know if that's probably a very good explanation. but you start with looking at the element itself, and then you start propagating event changes, listening to what's going on from inside the closure. Pointer library API, did I close that? It is in caniuse.com. You can take a, oops, wrong browser. I have closed my screen, but you can take a look at Can I Use. Just search for pointer events, and that is all explained in Can I Use. And there's also documentation that you can visit. There's links from within Can I Use. What else? Let's see. How do I open HTML, JavaScript, CSS editors, and VS Code? So what I do is I go to just the folder, and then it opens up. So if I would go to File, Open, and then look for my terrarium, I just open it here, and then these files should be available to you for editing. Live preview of your terrarium, good question. So I right-click on index, HTML, I click open with, sorry, I don't do that. I click reveal in Finder, and then I choose whichever browser I want to use. I can do open with here, and I can choose to test on various browsers such as Firefox, Edge, on Chrome, whatever you like. Always useful to do a little bit of cross-browser testing, and check it on your iPhone. Mobile Safari is always a picnic. Let's see. Any other questions? I learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript in uni last semester. How can I get started on projects? Yes, that's a great question. I think what you need to do is to think about your passions and think what side projects you can build that will really kind of test your skill. That's what I did for years and years, just building cute and fun things and seeing what works, what needs, what could be, written better, how I could refactor, what other kind of projects are really helpful with this sort of thing. So just as many side projects as you can, build up your GitHub portfolio. And if you like, there's a really great resource called JavaScript 30. It's 30 Days of JavaScript. It's by Wes Boss, who's a fantastic instructor. And he builds based on projects. So each day you'll do a different project, and maybe some of those projects will inspire you. One of them is like building a drum kit, but done in JavaScript. It's really a lot of fun, cool things. So JavaScript 30. To make the app responsive, in index HTML, you're going to have your viewport here set to the initial scale of 1. And what made this thing really work nicely responsively is that in all of the CSS, everything of importance, everything that I could get is done in percentages, so that the widths are kept in percentages so that they scale up and scale down according to what you like. That of course works particularly well in CSS because it's going to scale and stretch nicely because it's just colors. It's not like images that you have to scale and stretch. Coding language course. Yes, there's some good. There is a good Learn module called Build a Basic CSS and JavaScript and HTML file. I think if I go to my master branch, oops, you'll find it in my README. Oh dear, I have to screw around with changes. But if you look in the README of this repo, there is a link to a Learn module, and it should be quite helpful. I think we're over time. Are we over time? I think that's it. Access to the pointer API in the project. These are APIs that are built into the browser. So you're going to have access to those automatically as long as your browser supports them. Pull down the code from GitHub. You can go ahead and either clone. Actually, what I recommend is forking the repo right here in forks to your own account, or if you want to, just clone or download to your local if you want to fork and then clone your own copy, or you can clone my copy as you like. Okay, I think we're over time. We had really a lot to cover, and I hope it was at least somewhat helpful. Go ahead and take a look at some of these links here. Use Can I Use as much as you can. Oh, here's that link for Microsoft Learn, and it's build a simple website. So there's lots of good resources on Learn. I think I just saw a question here. Okay, I think we're over time, and we should stop. So please go ahead and let me see if I can find my slides again. Oh dear, there they are. So there's lots of things to do after this. You can fill out your survey, please. Visit student resources at Students at Build. There's a brand new landing page, and it's got a lot of amazing stuff on it. Consider looking at Imagine Cup, and consider joining a group when you are ready. And we also have a program called Student Learn Ambassadors, which is super fun, and you can join that. Try Azure. Azure for Students gives you $100 in credit on the Azure Cloud, and you can start building using AKA MS Azure for Students. Visit Learn. Check out that Build a Simple Website module. And I think that's it for us. Thank you so much, and reach out to me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay.